Hello and welcome to another episode of App Stories. I'm John Voorhees, and I have Federico Viticci with me. Hey, Federico.
Hello, John. How are you?
I'm doing great. We got a good topic today. We got a lot of good topics, but before we dig into the meat of the episode, I wanted to do a very brief little bit of follow-up with you because we talked all about ClawdBot on Mac Stories Unwind, of all places, a couple of weeks ago, and then I know you also talked with Stephen and Mike about it on Connected a couple of times, and I thought I would catch everybody up here as to what's been going on because it's been evolving so rapidly, and App Stories seems like the best place for it. We don't have to repeat everything we talked about in Unwind or you talked about on Connected, but where is everything, and what should people be thinking about this project right now, I guess, is what I would say.
So it's been renamed twice. So obviously following the original name of ClawdBot, Anthropic got in touch when the project started to get really popular. And they asked, since the name was very similar sounding to Claude, they seem to have asked, I don't know if politely or not, for a name change. And so according to creator Peter Steinberger, at 5 a.m. in a sleep-deprived sort of brainstorming session on Discord, of all places, the community voted for this name, MoltBot.
Horrible name.
The idea that since the mascot was a crab, like a
lobster. I think.
Like a lobster.
Yeah.
And lobsters, when they shed their skin, they molt, right? And so they kind of went for this tongue-in-cheek name of MoltBot, which was horrible, to be fair. But it was under pressure with a letter from Anthropic. And so I understand, if you're sleep-deprived and you got a letter from a huge corporation with lawyers behind it, and you're just a solo indie developer running an open-source project, I understand why you went for the rushed decision, but after a few days and lots of people thinking, oh boy, MoltBot is really a horrible name, they landed in a not so sleep-deprived state on the much better name, as we're recording this on Friday, of OpenClaw. So that's a much better name, and it keeps the original claw thing with the lobster and the sort of similar sounding to the original ClawdBot name, but it's open source, so OpenClaw. I think it sounds much better. It's still a funny name, but it's also a normal name that is not MoltBot.
All you have to do is go to the Discord for what was ClawdBot and is now OpenClaw, and you will realize the chaos.
40,000 people.
It is. This is like going to like a really big YouTube live stream and looking at the comments scroll up really fast. I mean, it's almost to that level that you cannot keep up with that Discord. There's so much going on there. It is a huge project, and it's really, I mean, it's obviously a community now of people contributing to the project, but at the heart of it is just Peter.
Yeah. And this project has really taken off in a bunch of weird and unexpected directions. There's Cloudflare, of all companies, Cloudflare, that is now offering a managed, hosted solution for OpenClaw. Did you see, John, this other thing called Moltbook?
I did. I was just reading about that on Simon Wilson's blog today.
A social network for the OpenClaw agents. So these agents are put together, like the creator of Moltbook created this like fake social network, like more like Reddit, really. It's like a fake Reddit for just AIs to talk to each other. And it's an insane place on the internet where these agents are talking to each other as if they were Reddit users. And they are creating their own sub-communities. They're creating their own like narratives and stories, and they're sharing feelings. They're not real feelings, mind you. They're fake AI agent feelings, and they're talking to each other, me like, yes, my human wanted me to build him something. It's weird and creepy and fascinating, and also the data exfiltration risk of that place. Like, imagine hooking up your agent and telling your agent, go have fun and hang out on a social network.
Yeah, go hang out on this random website that anybody can post anything to, basically.
And imagine if, like, your agent starts, for the funsies of it all, starts sharing your secrets, right, on this social network, because that is still your agent running on your computer.
Yeah, or posting some JavaScript or something that then does something to your computer. I mean, there's there's a lot of bad things that could happen from that.
Simon Willison writes, given the inherent risk of prompt injection against this class of software, it's my current pick for most likely to result in a challenger disaster. But I'm going to put that aside for the moment.
And those risks are real, even putting aside something like this Moltbook thing, because I know you've kind of locked yours down a little bit more than you had it originally locked down, just because your article has gotten so popular and your name is all over the internet with attached to ClawdBot.
It's wild, man. I really don't know. But this project is obviously taking off OpenClaw because it's for some people it's hitting all the right notes in terms of what people want from an AI-powered assistant. And at this point, given the popularity of this, given how my article went really popular, much more popular than I expected, I really don't know where this is gonna land. I really don't know. There's probably a security disaster. I think Simon Willison is right. There's gonna be some kind of disaster at some point. Be very mindful of what you hook up to your OpenClaw agent. Be very mindful of prompt injection and data.
Make sure you know what are
attacks.
make sure you know what's in the skills, both the scripts and the markdown.
Make sure you know what you're installing from skills from other people.
Don't put it on your main computer if you can. I mean, you should put it on a separate computer if you can. I know Federico did that with a Mini.
But I really don't know, and I think at some point you gotta wonder, like, why is it so popular? If you're OpenAI or if you're Anthropic, you must be wondering, why is this thing so popular? Like, and I think there's something there. If you're one of those companies, you gotta think about, like, okay, maybe this proves that we haven't been doing enough with our LLMs, because I think beyond the funny story and now the fake social network, behind the memes and everything, there is an underlying truth that is people are using this because it's useful. And so if you're one of those companies, you got to be thinking about that, like that core truth that it's useful, and how can they make ChatGPT or Claude more useful like that while being more secure and safer and easier, obviously, to get started. But there's something there, and I think that's the space that I want to observe.
Yeah, same here. I mean, do you think the difference between this and, say, just having the Claude app on your iPhone is the continuity of it, the fact that it's running on it's got to be, I mean, it's the fact that it's running on a server locally, has access to your file system, and has some continuity from session to session, right? Isn't that kind of like at a basic level why this is more popular than just a one-off chatbot?
The reason why it's popular is that I think part of it is the self-improvement of it all. Like,
yeah, that's true. That's a good point.
A feature does not exist. I'm just gonna make myself a feature for that.
Yeah.
And I also think, I ran something last night. I wanted to see. Now, it seems like if you spend some time following some people that are still only posting on X, formerly Twitter,
right?
You must have seen that now suddenly X articles are really popular. Like, people are blogging on X.
Yes, like 1,000-word essays.
Jesus, but sure.
I agree.
Let's go with that. And I wanted to see if is there a way for me to get these articles. Some of them are like these hype articles that have basically no value.
But you occasionally will find like a good how-to.
There is the occasional gem. And I was like, okay, there's this interesting article from somebody who works on Anthropic. Is there a way for me to extract this article from X via some API or something to put the text somewhere else? And I asked both OpenClaw and Claude, the regular Claude app, in a regular chat. It immediately ran out of context, and it started looping on itself. Like, how do I do this? And then, like, compaction fails. You can no longer have a chat in this session. I went to OpenClaw, and because it's based on the Claude Code agentic harness, it just did it. It just found a way. It eventually, you know what it did?
What did it do?
It opened Google Chrome.
Of course it did.
To read the article. But that's the thing. You are so limited in the regular chatbots. And I think that's what's resonating with people. OpenAI knows this. They've been blogging about the fact that they realized, we made ChatGPT so powerful, and yet it's not that powerful.
Yeah, the overhang.
the capability overhang. One of my favorite
the
expressions of the year so far.
One of the first time I read that, I was like, wait, what?
Is that English? Anyway, OpenClaw. It's called OpenClaw now, and it's funny because in our analytics, I see so much traffic coming from 3 separate domains now: ClawdBot, MoltBot, and OpenClaw, because MacStories is linked on all the 3 domains.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, that's great. That's great. Okay, well, let's transition over to the main topic today.
Yes.
And this is kind of what I would call the wrap-up episode of our discussions about our projects over the holidays, and then like tips and tricks about how we're using things like Codex and ClawdBot, ClawdBot and just Claude Code. And today I want to talk about something that I know has been on your mind and my mind a lot for many weeks now, which is, what does this all mean in terms of the kind of things that we cover? What does this mean in terms of apps, both the App Store itself, developers that we know? Where is this all heading? And I think that is something that we probably aren't going to be able to answer completely today, but I think we both have a lot of thoughts and feelings about it. So I don't know. I'll let you kick it off, Federico. What do you think? Where do you want to start? I feel like, I'm sorry, I'm going to already interrupt you. I think we need context here.
You're just interrupting yourself, man.
I am. I think we need...
I haven't said anything yet.
Well, one thing I wanted to kind of lay out at the beginning of this is that I get the sense sometimes that we hear from readers who are like, well, I'm not going to get any apps that are using AI in the development process. And I'm just kind of here to tell you that it's already happening. And it's already happening probably with all the apps that you're using on the App Store. I think that this is a tool what I'm saying is this is a tool that people are using, and they're using it effectively. If it's put in the hands of a developer who knows what they're doing, it makes them more efficient. And I think you don't hear about it a lot necessarily as a user. We hear about it from people we know, but because AI can be so controversial in some quarters, I think people don't talk a lot about what the tools they're using to build their apps.
Yeah, but it's happening. I mean, even if you think you're taking an anti-AI stance, which is perfectly reasonable, but you should not live under the impression that you're using completely AI-free software, unless you're literally spending time at each developer's house and sort of hanging over their shoulder and watching them type code, or unless you are a programmer yourself and you just bootstrap your entire operating system. Because, I mean, even the OS, Apple is using
people
Claude.
Internally at Apple are using it. Yes, absolutely.
So you cannot
it's built into Xcode.
You cannot escape the cycle. But that being said, I'll start with the simple truth. I think we are at the beginning of this new era, and very simply, there still hasn't been a quote-unquote App Store moment for vibe-coded software, whatever you want to call it. I guess what I'm trying to say is that doing this, writing your own personal software, using AI to create something that does not exist on the App Store, it's still too hard to do, still too difficult for most people. I wouldn't go to my friends in real life and I wouldn't go there and evangelize Claude Code to them. This is still very much a hobbyist or nerd or whatever you want to call it kind of thing. It's not for the masses, but it's going to be. That's the thing. Right. So it's better to start thinking about the problems now before the problems arrive all of a sudden and we're left with just staring at the ocean of vibe code software. I think it's better to think about the ramifications now because it is going to happen. It's difficult now. It's not for everybody, but it's getting easier by the day, not even by the week, not even by the month. Right. It's getting easier by the day. And so that's the first thing I will say.
And I want to say that I think the first place we're going to see this, Federico, is in the kind of single-purpose utilities.
Yeah, yes.
Because that's like you and I have been essentially building our own single-purpose utilities for things that we do for MacStories, and that's essentially what we're doing. We're building what are basically scripts, and we're wrapping them in either like a web app or in my case, I've done a couple of native apps as well, and doing it that way. And that, to me, having gone through the experience of building a couple of different things, both for web apps and for iOS and Mac OS, it's clear to me that we're going to see an absolute flood of single-purpose utilities. So I think in the short term, we're going to see a lot more apps on the App Store. But I also think that additional supply and the fact that people are building their own tools, the supply is going to increase, the demand is going to go down, and we're going to see a real inversion there pretty quickly, I think.
Yes. Yeah, that's I completely agree. I think I saw this expression being used online, abundance of software. We live in a software abundance era. If you are, all digital revolutions, they start with computer nerds. And
Right.
then they get simplified and productized and consumerized, and they become easier for everybody to use. But they always start with nerds. They always start with people who listen to AppStories, with people who hang out on Mastodon, those kinds of people. They start with programmers. And then they get easier and easier and easier, and they become the equivalent of a product that you can buy off the shelf. And I think right now, what we're seeing in our community with people like us is that there's been a decline for... I'm going to give you a very simple example. I used to regularly post, used to be Twitter, then Mastodon, then Blue Sky. Used to regularly post like, hey, does this app exist? Or somebody should make this very specific thing. Now, I can make my own very specific thing.
Yep.
And I can tell you this has been happening to me. A few weeks ago, I wanted to have a simple utility just to append text or audio or images to my daily note in Notion. What are the odds now that something like that exists on the App Store? I would say pretty likely, right? Because Notion is popular, and there's a pretty good chance that I could find something to append some text or an image or some audio to a note in Notion. But then I started thinking, but would those daily notes be named exactly like I want them to be named?
Exactly.
You start thinking what about all my own little preoccupations that I have, all my little preferences that I have? And so I ended up making one with Cloud Code and then Codex, as we talked about. But that's what's changing right now.
That's the big difference, Federico, is that if you had found that app, you would be molding the way you work to the way the app works. Whereas now you don't have to do that. You've already got your setup with your daily note. Now you can build something that works the way you want it to with your existing system. You don't have to change anything.
Yes. And so I think that's going to happen first to utilities, to self-contained, very clearly defined little pieces of software that are supposed to do, the age-old expression, one thing well. Now you're going to make it yourself. Now, if you're a developer, what does that mean? I think what we're going to see next... So I think I completely agree. We're going to see an abundance of this software, and there's going to be problems with that, right? In terms of copyright, who owns the code? Nothing and everybody. It's very strange. But also there's going to be, I think at some point, we will get the first stories of this vibe-coded app that I got from the App Store leaked all my data because the security practices were not strong enough. So there will be at some point a movement toward using real developer-made apps again.
Right.
And there's still maybe people there are already people who say that. But I think if you're a developer, what I would consider is a different paradigm for writing software. And by that I mean, it used to be very deterministic, right? That you're a developer, you want to make an app for, cropping pictures, and you release it on the App Store. And you release it on the App Store, and you get a bunch of reviews, and some people like it, and other people say, well, I like it. I like that I can crop pictures, but I wish I could also duplicate pictures. And your app does not duplicate pictures, right? And so you got to go back in and add a feature to duplicate pictures. I think going forward, we will see the rise of a new type of app that is, talking about OpenClaw, the kind of a self-improving app where you as the user can go into this type of application and you can just add a feature that does not exist yet. Now that requires a fundamental rethinking of the sandboxing model and the technology model of an app. Like, how can you rewrite something that is not shipped on the App Store like the original binary of the app, right? You're basically modifying software. And I don't know the answer to that. And I think maybe it could be something, behind the scenes. Could be something like running a script or something like Swift Playgrounds, where you can install Swift Playgrounds, but then you can make your own playground on device. But I think the rise of this new type of app, of an agentic type of app, where the users very simply can modify the experience and make them their own without having to go to Cloud Code, without having to sign up for a developer account. I think if I were a developer, I would start considering this, which is not too dissimilar from editorial or Pythonista or what these apps used to do back in the day, or even Obsidian for that matter, where if a feature does not exist, you can make your own plugin. I think we're going to see the rise of that.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a very good point. There are a couple of things here that I've been thinking about, and one of them is in building my own Mac app over the last couple of weeks. What I found in using Claude Code was that I got 80+% of the way there very, very quickly, like, in a few hours worth of fiddling around. And then the process has been very, very slow as I try to refine it and make it more appealing to a mass audience, someone beyond just myself. And I think that that's kind of an interesting thread here that I've been thinking about a lot, because on the one hand, you and I can build a Python script tie it up to a web app, and it'll work just the way you want it or just the way I want it. But that only works for us. And where I think that there's still going to be opportunities for developers is in the design and the productizing of some of these utilities and other types of software, because we're talking about people like you and I who are willing to do this kind of work to get exactly what we want. We got to remember that the App Store is still a place where most people won't buy anything, and most people don't download apps obsessively like we do. And so there's still a market for people who don't want to get their hands dirty in the code in a way, I think. And I think that that's not going to change just because it's possible to do it more easily. I think there's still going to be a decent, a good market. The thing that I think, though, is that the tension there is that the people who really want, and this is why I've been thinking about utility apps a lot, the people who really want a good single purpose utility are the people who are most likely to build it themselves, because they're very picky and particular about what they want and how they have their workflows set up. And that, I think, is where a lot of the initial play in this market is going to be, is with that market that I think a lot of developers are looking at and selling to, of people who actually spend money on apps and actually care about apps. And the thing that's going to be different for them between something they can build themselves and something somebody else builds for them is someone who takes the time to kind of make it really nice. And that's, and really nice is both from a product standpoint, a design standpoint, all those kind of things.
Yeah. I think obviously the other idea is that maybe not necessarily everybody thinks about software along those lines. You sent me this article a few days ago. What's it called? Cloud Code Psychosis?
Yes.
Or something like that. This idea that while people like us in our community are obsessing over these new capabilities of agents like Cloud Code and Codex to make software on demand, personal software for you in just a few minutes, most people in real life, they don't obsess over software like that.
They don't see problems as software problems, I think, is one of the points of the article. Right.
Yeah, that's what the article says. They don't see problems as software problems all the time. Whereas you and me, we're doing something, and that's the automation mindset, right? We do something because we are knowledge workers, as they say.
Yes. And overworked people who want to find a shortcut.
Yeah, but our brains are sort of wired to think like that, where you see a problem and you see that problem twice or three times, and our brains immediately go, "Oh, I can fix that with software," right?
Yep.
But most people don't think like that. Most people in real life, that don't have jobs that involve staring at a terminal or keeping up with AI news, if they don't like their Notes app, they don't think like, "Oh, maybe I should make my own Notes app." They're just going to find
Right.
something else or complain about it or
Right.
live with it, because most people have a surprisingly high threshold for crappy software.
They do.
So that's why I want to go back to that idea of the App Store moment. Like, what's the shape of a moment in time, maybe in the not so distant future, where this idea, the core of this idea, which is software can be personalized per user, the moment that it becomes so simple and so intuitive that anybody can do it. And I'm not sure what that looks like.
I think it looks a little bit like what we talked about at the very top of the show, which is OpenClaw, where you have an agent that does it for you, where it's but obviously it has to be, light years easier than what OpenClaw is, because that's a very fiddly process to set up.
Yeah.
But I think this is kind of where the notion of everything apps are coming from a lot of these AI companies. They want their AI agent to build the software for you, that you'll go into OpenAI's app, whatever it happens to be, or Anthropic's, and you'll just tell your agent, I need something that'll help me fill out my taxes, or I need something to write me a resume, and it'll come up with something on the fly and give it to you. And it may be doing it from kind of a templating system, or it may be, and then using that to craft something more particular to your needs as you describe it. But I think it's going to be something like that.
Yeah, I think you're right. And if anything, I think of all companies, I think Apple has a pretty good shot at doing this, even though they're late. I think they have a chance. So they were late to the chatbot, right? To the chatbot UI, to the ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini experience. What they are not late to is this, like the idea of, yes, an assistant, yes, it's based on an LLM, yes, it can be a chatbot, but applying that power to user personalization. And I think whether that takes the shape of, as we talked about, a fundamentally rethought shortcuts, or something else where maybe you're just talking to Siri, and since it's now much more capable, you can just say things like, "Hey Siri, can you make a note that is, has a purple background and a grid of photos of my dogs, and send that as a calendar invitation for my dog birthday party."
Right.
Isn't that personalized software? It is personalized software.
Yeah.
And I think Apple has a chance to not be late to that, because nobody has figured it out, because nobody has the platform and the app ecosystem and the devices to do that. So that would be a fascinating move, especially if you're Apple and, they invented the mobile app store and they still have a shot to redo it all again from that angle. And I think it will be really fascinating. And obviously it would also be scary, because Apple makes a lot of money from the App Store, from services and from commissions. What happens when would they be incentivized to cannibalize the App Store and to ride this new wave of software?
And our developers going to be incentivized. I think the part here too, that it's like, I think from a user standpoint, things like app intents make a lot of sense, and that's a good foundation on which to kind of build this kind of model. However, I do feel like from a developer standpoint, if you have your photo cropping app and now all of a sudden users can crop photos without ever having to open your app, you've commoditized that functionality. And there could be 5 different apps on my phone that crop things. And yes, if you're first to the party by being the first one to implement app intents, maybe that makes you the default. But that's not always going to be the case for every app that anyone makes. And so I do wonder, how that plays out in terms of developers wanting to opt into this system or not. I mean, we've seen a lot of developers we know build out app intents. And I feel like we're still at a point with app intents where there's a lot of open questions still. And I think the questions that were open in 2024, when a lot of this was, app intents go back farther than that, but when Smarter Siri was first discussed, the questions then have multiplied because the world has changed since 2024. And now, how does this work with Gemini being integrated? There's just a lot of questions that aren't really answered in terms of what it means for developers ultimately.
Yeah, I don't know, and there's obviously the developer angle also from a financial perspective. Like, if all of this is going to happen, how are developers going to make money? Is everybody just going to become an AI developer?
Is everybody just going to be essentially writing APIs for an AI? That's what it, you know what I mean? That's what this is in a way. That's what we're seeing both on the Anthropic and OpenAI side, but also app intents are arguably that. We talked about them being like endpoints for APIs, and that's great. You and I love endpoints for APIs. We can do all kinds of stuff with that, but that doesn't necessarily make it good for developers.
Yeah, and that also turns into a bigger conversation about like how is programming changing in general.
Right.
If I saw, I think I mentioned this on the show before, I saw somebody arguing that people who say that AI is a bubble and it's going to go away, do those people think that LLMs will be uninvented? Like, because, at this point, the cat's out of the bag, right? Even if the AI bubble bursts and OpenAI goes bankrupt and Anthropic ceases to exist, very unlikely scenarios, but let's assume that it will happen. Do we think that LLMs will suddenly become irrelevant?
The web didn't go away when, when all those companies crashed.
It didn't. Yeah. And so there's a question of if LLM assisted programming is replacing code written by humans, what's the role of a human in a programming economy going forward? Are all developers just going to become agent managers? Like, is that what's going to happen? Like, big picture? Because even if you think, and when I say big picture or long term, what's a long term at this point? Because a year ago, Cloud Code did not exist.
Right.
And so what does it look like a year from now? I have no idea, but I see, I take a look at people like Peter Steinberger, for example, and Peter runs open source projects, right? They're not commercial projects,
right?
But he's a former developer who sold his previous company for like $100 million. So he knows programming. He used to be a regular programmer by trade 10 years ago, and now he's basically a manager of agents and sub agents, and ships a ton of open source projects. Yeah. And I would say at this point it's fair to imagine that maybe he mentioned that the ClawdBot website was visited by 2 million people. So let's say that 1 million people installed ClawdBot or OpenClaw. And he's just a guy managing multiple terminal sessions with a bunch of agents and sub-agents. Is he a programmer? Obviously he's a programmer, but he's a new type of programmer. And if we extrapolate from that and sort of launch ourselves 1 year or 2 years into the future, what does an iOS developer look like?
I've heard it described as kind of the collapsing of hardware and software, where it's the hardware that's now making the software, and there's not a person in between the two, which I think is an interesting idea. I still think there's going to be humans involved in that somewhere, but it's an interesting way to think about it.
The final thing I will say is that I do share the opinion of Anthropic CEO Dario Amodei that while all of this is scary, potentially dangerous, and there are so many ethical problems, and the alignment issue of artificial intelligence is a real issue that unfortunately few companies are thinking about. But I do share his optimistic view from his latest essay that I think it's called The Adolescence of AI, that over the long, or maybe not so long, arc of human history, we as a species have been surprisingly capable to adapt and find new roles for ourselves through the many not so many, the couple of industrial revolutions that we've had. But through the arc of human history, we have constantly replaced our previous roles in any field and found new roles for ourselves.
Right.
And I do think we will collectively, as a society, as a species, we will come to an agreement in terms of what's the role of humans. I don't think we will end up, 7 billion people on Earth. I don't think we will end up all together on a beach somewhere doing nothing.
No, and you're already seeing that. I mean, the people who are squeezing productivity out of AI, it's allowing them to do things they wouldn't have had time for anyway, right? Before, they wouldn't have had time to extend themselves and do all these different things. Now they're just doing more instead of less. I mean, I think the idea that
I think that's called the Jevons paradox, where despite improvements in a technological field that was supposed to make something more efficient, it didn't make us work less. It made us work more.
Yes.
So I do believe that's gonna happen again.
I've felt that myself. There are projects that I've taken on and done that I wouldn't have had time for, 6 months ago, and now I can do it.
Yeah, but to get to that point, we will need to have these conversations, and I hope we will continue to be able to have these conversations with this perspective of like, if AI is here to stay, what are we gonna do? And we need to take a look at ourselves, and we need to think of the ramifications, both political, economical, and societal ramifications. Right? When it comes to the software that we use on our phones, maybe at some point on our glasses, on our computers, we need to think about those problems. So we need to think about our roles, right, as people managing that. And so I don't think this episode has any major revelations. It's more of a conversation and maybe, I don't know, like a therapy session between me and you. But it's the kind of thing that's been on my mind. Like, if software is changing, how are people also changing in the process?
Right, and it really goes to the heart of what AppStories has always been about. I mean, it's not just about what the apps do; it's the cultural and economic and societal implications of apps. It's really not been that long that we've lived in a world that was dominated by apps on a little slab of glass in our pocket, and now we've got something different changing now too. So it's wild.
Well, I think that's an episode of App Stories for this week. We're going to talk about Creator Studio in the post-show for AppStories Plus members. I obviously want to thank you, John, for this excellent conversation. You can find the both of us just blogging away at the newly updated, redesigned, integrated, unified MacStories.net. You can find us on all the social media. You can find us on Mastodon, Blue Sky. And I really hope you check out the new Mac Stories with the club integration and App Stories all under one roof, and we have a lot more new features coming soon. And until then, say goodbye, John.
Ciao, Federico.